What happens when one family party exposes 3 years of lies? My name is Sienna Carter. I was 29 years old when my mother decided throwing me out of her house was not enough. She wanted a crowd for it. She wanted music, food, neighbors with paper plates, my uncle drunk in the yard, my little brother laughing like cruelty was a game. When I pulled into the driveway that Saturday afternoon to pick up the last box of my things, the first thing I saw was a huge vinyl banner hanging over the garage. Goodbye, Freeloader. That was the kind of family I came from. Not the kind that hurts you by accident. The kind that organizes it. There was grill smoke drifting across the yard. Country music blasting from a cheap speaker. Red and white pennants strung across the fence, like they were celebrating freedom instead of humiliation. My Uncle Rob was already drunk enough to be louder than necessary. My brother Tate was by the cooler, grinning, like this was the funniest thing he had ever seen. And my mother, Donna, stood by the grill in white shorts and gold hoops with that perfect smile she wore whenever she thought she had total control of the room. She spread her arms and said, "Look who finally came to collect her junk." People laughed. And that would have been the part that broke me a year earlier. But by then, something had already changed. Because what my family didn't know was this. By the time they threw me out in public, I had already spent years quietly holding up the life they were calling me a burden to. The banner, barbecue, humiliation, and freeloader framing are all from the original story you shared. In my family's version of the story, I was almost 30, unmarried, living at home, working from a laptop at a job nobody respected because they didn't understand it. To them, that meant failure. To strangers, it sounded believable. That's the thing about toxic families. They package exploitation in a way that photographs well. The truth was uglier for them. 3 years earlier, my mother's event rental company had started bleeding money. Carter Celebrations looked polished on the outside. Nice trucks. Nice warehouse. Nice branding. But inside, it was chaos wearing lipstick. Vendor bills got paid late. Deposits were tracked badly. Insurance paperwork kept lapsing. Schedules were a mess. Inventory was off. Managers quit. And my mother kept doing what people like her do best. Talking like leadership. Avoiding actual responsibility. My real job was remote operations and contracts coordination. I helped businesses clean up vendor paperwork, fix broken processes, track compliance, deadlines, and stop administrative chaos before it became expensive. I was good at systems. Very good. Which meant, the more I saw in her company, the harder it became to ignore. At first, I just fixed one invoice, then a contract, then an insurance issue, then a warehouse account, then a vendor problem, then a delivery mess, then software renewals, then utility balances, then fuel money, then replacement inventory. Every time I stepped in, I kept the business alive one more week. And every time I helped, my mother made it sound smaller. If I saved a client account, she told people, I mostly answered emails. If I rebuilt a broken system, she said I liked organizing things. If I paid a bill to stop a disaster, she called it family, helping family. Funny how family helps family only ever means your money when it's leaving your account. The source explains that Sienna was quietly funding and operating crucial parts of the family business while being publicly portrayed as freeloading. I paid more than they knew. Software fees, warehouse utilities, fuel advances, replacement inventory, shipping costs, even rent money for Tate when my mother claimed business was weird that month. Nobody paid me back. Nobody thanked me honestly. They just got used to me being the invisible support beam. That's the secret job. Toxic families give the strongest daughter. Carry everything quietly. Then smile while they call you lazy. At some point, I realized something worse than the insults. My mother actually believed her own story. She really thought the roof over my head erased every dollar. Every hour. Every emergency I had absorbed for that family. Once I understood that, I stopped trying to be understood. And I started building a record. Not a speech. Not a fight. Not some screaming match she could twist into proof I was unstable. Documentation. Spreadsheets. Bank statements. Texts. Invoices. Payment histories. Software receipts. Labor estimates. Emergency interventions. Late-night messages begging me to fix one small thing that was never small. I built a timeline going back almost 30 months. And when I totaled it, even I had to sit still for a minute. Business support alone had crossed $94,000. Direct family support pushed it more than $17,000 higher. That still didn't include the full value of my unpaid labor. The freeloader, apparently, had been the one underwriting the illusion. The documentation phase and the totals of what Sienna had quietly contributed are explicitly described in the file. Around that same time, a regular client in North Carolina offered me a longer contract. Steady work. Better rates. A real shot at building something clean. So I signed it. I found a one-bedroom apartment outside Charlotte. Nothing flashy. Just peace. The kind of place your nervous system recognizes before your brain does. Then I started moving my things out in batches so small nobody noticed. Winter coats. Kitchen items I bought myself. My office monitor. Files. Jewelry. The parts of my life that were actually mine. By the time my mother came into the kitchen one Wednesday morning with her fake, calm voice and announced that the healthiest thing for both of us was for me to leave by Saturday, most of what mattered was already gone. She dressed it up in words like boundaries and growth and responsibility. Then I asked her one question. Do you want me gone? Or do you want to show when I leave? The smirk at the corner of her mouth told me everything. Maybe both, she said. That was when the last of my guilt died. So before I left, I did one final thing. I removed my card from every backup billing system I had quietly tied to the company, disconnected my logins, stopped rewriting my mother's rude emails into professional language, stopped fixing the drafts she left unfinished, stopped preventing consequences. That distinction matters. I did not sabotage anything. I simply stopped protecting them from the cost of their own behavior. Then came Saturday. The banner. The hot dog hitting my car. The laughter. I walked in. Got my last box. Came back outside. Took one clear photo of the banner. My mother. Rob. Tate. and the audience she had gathered. My mother asked what it was for. I said, "For later." Then I drove away. Sienna had already secured a new life in North Carolina and quietly disconnected the support systems before the public send-off. For 3 days, nobody called. Because entitlement always mistakes silence for surrender. Then Monday hit. The venue insurance file had expired. Tuesday. The scheduling software failed because the backup card was gone and the main card declined. Without the software, they were back to chaos. Scraps of paper, bad memory, and panic. Warehouse accounts started wobbling. Planners got nervous. Vendors asked sharp questions. My mother suddenly developed a very soft voice. Confusion, she called it. Not gratitude. Not apology. Confusion. Rob called to say he hadn't meant what he said. Tate asked what I'd been paying for. My mother called 6 times before lunch one day, begging me to explain what I had turned off. That was when I printed the packet. 34 pages. Dates. Totals. Screenshots. Transfers. Labor estimates. Emergency saves. And at the end, one photo. The banner over the garage. My mother by the grill. Rob on the patio. Tate mid-laugh. The exact moment they thought they were documenting my humiliation, when really they were documenting their own exposure. We met at a diner near the interstate because I knew better than to give her home field advantage again. I slid the packet across the table and told her exactly what it was. The difference between your story and mine. She opened it with confidence. Lost that confidence almost immediately. Tried the usual defenses. Families help each other. Those numbers are inflated. You still lived in my house. And that was when I gave her the line I should have given years before. Interesting. When I lived in your house, you called it freeloading. But when you lived off my money and labor, it became family. That hit hard enough that even my drunk uncle went pale. The collapse begins after Sienna's support is removed. And the diner confrontation centers on her evidence packet and the double standard around family help. She asked what I wanted. That's the question people like her always ask when they run out of lies. Because it never occurs to them that maybe you don't want anything anymore. I told her the truth. Nothing. I wasn't there to negotiate. I wasn't there to save them. I was there so she could never again pretend she had no idea what I'd been carrying. Then she asked the real question. How much of the system could I turn back on? Not are you okay? Not we were wrong. Not how could we do this to you? Operations. That was my mother, in one word. I told her what could be fixed. What penalties already existed. What damage had been done. Then when she tried softness and old grief and guilt and family duty, I gave her one final answer. No. Distance. And because toxic parents hate distance more than they hate anger, that offended her more than any request for money ever could. So I gave her one envelope with resources. An attorney. 2 accountants. A bookkeeper. An insurance broker. A utility assistance contact. Resources. That was all I was offering. Then I stood up and left. No screaming. No tears. No dramatic speech. just truth. Paperwork. And the first boundary of my adult life that didn't come with an apology attached. The diner meeting ends with Sienna offering resources, not rescue, and choosing distance over renewed entanglement. After that, the family system started collapsing in installments. My mother tried to pull me back with a transitional support proposal, which is a funny phrase for, please come save the business I mocked you for holding together. I said no. Tate showed up later. Smaller. Quieter. Finally honest enough to admit what mattered most. He knew I'd been doing more than anyone admitted. He just didn't want to know how much. Because that would have forced him to see our mother clearly. That is the real poison in families like this. One person becomes the shock absorber. Everyone else benefits from pretending not to notice. But once the shock absorber leaves, the poison spreads. And suddenly, the people who laughed at the banner don't laugh as much. North Carolina suited me better than Florida ever had. One client became two. Two became a waiting list. I formed an LLC. Built better boundaries. Required deposits up front. Stopped doing midnight rescues for people who treated my skill like a hobby. Bought a used Subaru in cash. Put herbs on the balcony. Framed one of my late father's recipe cards in my kitchen. Small things. Real things. Mine. And that's the part I wish more people understood. The victory was never making them panic. The victory was learning that I was never the freeloader. I was the unpaid operations manager. The hidden payroll. The quiet reason the light stayed on. My mother's greatest mistake wasn't the barbecue. It was believing the daughter she humiliated would still come back once the bills came due. I didn't. And I don't regret it. I regret staying long enough to confuse being useful with being loved. But I will never regret the photo. The silence. The packet. The distance. Because by the time they begged 2 weeks later, it was already too late. I had finally learned the difference between family and a system built on your silence. And once you learn that, you stop volunteering to hold up the people who clap while you break.